When I first started learning about the science of reading, I had almost no foundation in phonics. I don't mean that I didn't learn phonics. I was taught to read in the 80s. My teachers gave me excellent instruction with explicit phonics instruction, and my mom taught me how to read even before I went to school using phonics. So I knew how to decode words and I was a good speller, but I really didn't know what to teach when it came to teaching phonics. I didn't know how to teach blending, how to teach kids to read longer words, or what spelling patterns to teach. So as soon as I began to be aware that much of what I had done when teaching reading and what I was telling other teachers to do was actually not backed by research at all, I read everything I could get my hands on, including a whole bunch of books all about teaching phonics. And today I want to share with you my favorites. If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, host of the Reach All Readers podcast, and I'm here to help you understand and apply the science of reading. So let's start with one of my favorite books about teaching phonics, and that is Phonics from A to Z by Wiley Blevins. This book is actually on its 4th edition. I think I started with a 3rd edition and almost fell off my chair when I saw that in the chapter about teaching the alphabet, he actually referenced my website, my 50 books about the alphabet, 50 alphabet books, on The Measured Mom, which was the name of my website before it was Reach All Readers. That was so exciting. But regardless, even if he didn't mention my website, this is still a really, really, really excellent book. I love that Blevins is so accessible for teachers. He writes in a way that's so easy to follow. He summarizes the research on phonics, walks through a bit of the history of phonics instruction, and then gives a whole lot of practical material like word lists, ideas for teaching phonemic awareness and letter recognition and blending. He gives his thoughts on sound walls. He discusses a possible scope and sequence, teaches strategies for teaching high-frequency words, shares books that feature different phonics patterns, gives you guidance as to what rules you might teach and how, lots of sample lessons. It really is phonics from A to Z. So highly recommend this one. As long as we're talking Wiley Blevins, I really also like A Fresh Look at Phonics. This book was published in 2017, which means it was pretty new when I read it. And it was really, really helpful for me as someone who really hadn't understood the importance of systematic explicit phonics instruction. It's, again, very readable, but it's, I would say, more for a book study than a comprehensive reference book. The first half is called The Key Ingredients for Phonics Success, and the second half is 10 Common Causes of Phonics Instruction Failure. And I really love also that every time he lists a cause of failure, he has the fix. So what to do if that's a mistake that you're making. So I would really recommend this for a book study for a school where teachers are learning more about teaching phonics and want to make that shift to more explicit teaching. As long as we're talking Wiley Blevins, the last one I want to recommend from him is Choosing and Using Decodable Texts, because this book is really good for people like me who thought that decodable texts were boring and stilted and not useful. That's probably because the decodable texts that I had to use were really bad. Thankfully, a lot's changed in the past 20 years. And in this book, he walks us through what makes a good decodable book, things you should steer clear of, as well as practical activities you can do with templates, worksheets that you can copy and use with your students. So a really nice, useful reference. Another book that I really, really recommend when it comes to teaching phonics is this book, Making Sense of Phonics. I've read the 2nd edition. This is the 3rd, so I actually haven't read this one yet. It looks very similar to the previous edition, but one thing I notice is different is the first chapter, which is called What is the Forecast for Phonics Instruction in the United States, which is super interesting because I think with the previous book, explicit systematic phonics instruction was pretty rare in the US. And now that they wrote this one, which was published, I think in 2024, things have looked very different, but there are probably still things we need to keep in mind. The first sentence says, our answer to the question in the chapter title is both hopeful and worrisome. So I'm really curious to see what they have to say about that. But in terms of what you'll find in this book, what I really love is the little classroom vignettes. So they talk case studies about particular students and word reading problems they had, and then they share the specific intervention that they provided that helped. It covers phonemic awareness, graphemes, high-frequency words with tricky spellings, specific procedures for teaching decoding, blending, word building, reading longer words. Again, it has word lists. Also, the graphics in the book are just really useful, things like this that will walk you through what they're talking about. So yeah, a really, really good book. If you are one of those people that still feels like English is crazy and you're kind of overwhelmed by all the discussion that people are having in Facebook groups about, words not ending in V or all the reasons for final silent E, and those are things you've never heard, then you'll probably want to get your hands on Uncovering the Logic of English by Denise Ide, or just go to her website. You might be able to find the rules there. I think sometimes it feels a little bit overkill, like some of them feel kind of obscure, and I wonder, are we reaching here? But I still think overall, it's really useful. You do have to be careful. Some of this is actually not accurate when it comes to morphology. So in the back of the book, when she talks about suffixes, she includes tion, ation, ition. Those are not suffixes because the T, anything before the ion is actually probably part of the base or it's a connecting vowel. And same thing in a section where she lists, I think it's SI, CI, and TI as graphemes. Those aren't graphemes. Usually the I often goes with the suffix IAN, and that consonant that comes before it is actually part of the base. So there is some misunderstanding of morphology, but this is an older book. It's 2011, so it wouldn't surprise me if the resources she gives out now are more accurate, but just keep that in mind. Here's another older book, but a really, really, really good one, and that is Teaching Word Recognition by Rolanda O'Connor. So we were actually, I remember taking a road trip with our family. We have 6 kids, and so road trips can be interesting in the car. Nowadays, most of them are teenagers, and they mostly just complain, but back then, there was probably a lot of crying, and I was able to tune it all out and just enjoy this book. It's just fascinating. I love the way that she answers any questions teachers might have, like, what about invented spelling? What about kids who won't try invented spelling? What about kids who can't completely segment spoken words? She basically takes every single issue that you might have and gives an answer. And she's a researcher, so I love that she summarizes research really well and is honest about where there's research and where there isn't. Really, I love this book so much. It would be one I wouldn't want to loan out in case I might need it. And finally, this book by Heidi Mesmer from the wonderful series by Scholastic, The Science of Reading in Practice. This is called Big Words for Young Readers, and this is for people who want to learn more about syllable types and morphology and how we might get them to work together. There are definitely going to be people who disagree with this because not everybody is a fan of syllable types, but I think, in my opinion, that Heidi Ann does a really good job of putting the two together and acknowledging that there might be a use for one in one context and a use for another in another context. So food for thought. I think the charts in here are really useful, as well as understanding all the vocabulary surrounding longer words like derivational and inflectional suffixes. So yeah, I like this one too. So if you want to get started and you're wondering which book to choose, here's how you might think about it. If you're coming from a balanced literacy background and you want something accessible and practical right away, then probably A Fresh Look at Phonics is a good place to start, especially if you have teachers to read it with you. If you want a comprehensive reference, you'll go back to again and again, a nice, beautiful format, I would recommend Phonics from A to Z. If you feel like you really don't understand the English language and all these conversations in Facebook groups about rules, about illegal letters and things go over your head, you might want to read Uncovering the Logic of English. And then if you are looking for a book that is helping you to go a little bit deeper, then I would recommend Making Sense of Phonics or Teaching Word Recognition. And if you want to learn more about other books that I recommend for other areas of teaching literacy, be sure to head to the link below this video and check out my Science of Reading book list. I add to it as I read more books. You'll also want to check out my Science of Reading podcast index, which has hundreds of podcast episodes organized by topic. So if you want to hear some expert conversations about phonics, you can do that there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.